Welcome to Unfiltered Health, where we dive deep into the real stories, science, and struggles shaping modern health. Your host, Dr. Sean Hall, is an internationally recognized author, medical researcher, and lecturer. Join me as we strip away the noise and explore how chronic illnesses are impacting not just our bodies, but the very fabric of our social and human function. This isn't your typical health talk. Here, it's raw, it's real, and it's time we talk about the hard truths. Ready to rethink health? Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back. At the moment, I'm in California and I'm with a very dear friend of mine who has also very much influenced choices I've made and career paths I've taken in life sciences. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Dr. David Rutolo. For a lot of people who may not know who Dave is probably best described as the father of my-cell technology, and he has been a staple for many decades without Dave punching your age in both manufacturing and product development across various life science aspects, from nutraceuticals, or as our American friends call them, food supplements, even today into pharmaceutical world. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dave. Say hi to everyone, Dave.
Hi, Sean. Thank you. It's nice to be here to discuss a few things about nutrition. Certainly, since you mentioned I'm such an old guy, things have changed for the last 30, 40 years, considering where we started out. But happy to chat with you about what's going on now.
Thank you very much for that. And sorry for the grin, but yeah, we've spent a lot of time together. Listen, I think based on your experience, there's two really interesting things we should touch on in this podcast. Number one is most people are still very much confused on how to read a label, especially when it becomes a food supplement. And considering you have experience, US, Australia, Japan, and even certain parts of Europe, I might get you to talk a little bit on labeling in food supplements, nutritional panels, and so forth. And then the importance of real product development as opposed to, let's call it, Google product development. Yeah, I can see the grin on your face. So if you want, give us some snippets and help the listeners better understand better choices to make when looking at a product label.
Sure.
Or on the very least, better questions to ask the people who are trying to sell those products.
Yeah, I think we can clarify a few things. There are differences between what we call in the US a supplement versus a nutritional product or food. And what's on the label is numbers of what ingredients are listed, which are supposed to be in the proper serving size for the product. In addition, the other ingredients are supposed to be listed in order of the highest weight first down to the lowest at the bottom of that type of label. So what do you want to look at when you're looking at a label? You want to see what are the nutrients there. The difference between a supplement label and a food or nutrition label is that the supplement label lists the active ingredients and tells you what's there in terms of, at least in the U.S., what they call daily value. And daily value is the amount that's been determined by a group of scientists, and they constantly will modify those to what they feel is essential for basic nutrition. It's not necessarily optimum, and it's not necessarily deficiency, but it's a standard that they have created. It has changed, not too long ago, a couple years ago, they have increased some of the nutrients. For example, vitamin D, they have increased twice to make it double what they say is essential. And most of the things have increased. A couple of things have decreased. So that's what you'll see on a supplement label. And it tells you a percentage of what is in that label versus what the requirement is. On a nutritional label, you'll see that too, but you'll also see things like fat, carbohydrate, fiber, calories, sodium level, protein. The more macro, what we call macronutrients. So you get an idea if you're looking for a certain amount of protein in a product, it will tell you the amount per serving. If you're looking at sugar, at least on the U.S. label, we put total carbohydrates, but we also list added sugars. natural occurring are listed, but added sugars are also listed. So if you're looking for products, you want to see what's your objective. You're looking at something that has protein, you want low carbohydrate, you can find that on a label if you're looking for it. With regard to the types of labels for a supplement, you might say, well, I want so much calcium. So you'll look at the label and it will tell you the amount per serving, and then it will tell you the percentage of the daily requirement. Incidentally, calcium has increased about 30% what it used to be in the last couple of years. So you'll be able to see what things you want in a product, but you have to learn to read it. They are, of course, in milligrams, sometimes micrograms, but don't try to translate that into ounces or anything. If you're like Americans do, that doesn't make any sense.
So what are you saying? Americans need to learn the metric
system?
system?
Yeah, we should have had the metric system years ago. We're working in labs and stuff. We never deal in anything other than that for 30, 40 years. We always, we always think in terms of centigrade for temperatures. Everything we do is metric. And so sometimes people will say, could you translate that into English? I said, you talking about American English into ounces and pounds and Fahrenheit and all that. So fortunately, most of the world, if not all, I don't think too many people are on that English system. I think everybody's on metric for the most part. So that's what's there. But it gives you a chance to say, what do I want in a product and what am I looking for? And then, of course, after you see what's on the label, then you have to wonder the source of the material, is it really in there? And that's based on confidence of the supplier.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So when we look, just to sort of traverse over to pharmaceutical, it's safe to say that there are certain requirements around making a nutraceutical product, but they can be fairly lax. Australia has a different standard where nutraceutical products by and by should be approved or listed with the TGA, and there's interesting requirements around that. But here in the US, it would appear on the surface that anyone can put together a nutraceutical product. Nutraceuticals don't fall under the domain of FDA unless you're making some pretty wild claims or you actually harm someone where they might step in. So, me being an Australian, being in and out of the US, I find that there is more of an aggressive marketing tool used for food supplements or nutraceuticals here in the US. And it can get real confusing to a person as to, I don't know if I want to use the word authenticity or the realistic values of the product, moving forward. And I think considering your organic chemistry background and your work in product development, there might be some advice you can share with people because, you spoke about calcium, but how many different types of calciums are there on the market? Yeah. And they do different things.
Right. Right. There's a lot more to the formulation of the product. And as you mentioned, in the United States, we're a little different. We have, of course, a drug category. It could be prescription or OTC. And then we have a supplement, which is what most people think of, I guess, in Australia may come under some kind of a TGA requirement.
Listed medicines.
Then we have what we call nutritional products, which come under food category. So we have a sort of a third category. We have drugs, and then we have the supplements, and we have food. But aside from that, what Sean had just asked about, just learning what the nutrient content is on that label doesn't tell you much actually about the sources of those materials. For example, you could take like calcium. There's all kinds of different calcium. You get calcium phosphates, but you want organic bound ones like gluconates, lactates. They're far more available in terms of absorption. Same thing with zinc. Zinc can come in zinc oxide, which is inorganic, or zinc gluconate. In some powders, we like to use glycinate because we happen to know that's more soluble. So a lot of the formulation depends on the form of the product, and there you have to trust the manufacturer to make the most available in terms of bioavailability you can get. Obviously, there's certain nutrients are fat soluble, like A, D, E, K, That's a little different category as well. So you have to have forms there that are most active. For example, vitamin D, Sean, as you know, a lot of times you'll see vitamin D3. It's called ergocalciferol. It's a vegetable source, but the D3, which is cholecalciferol, is the most active form, and the form you really want in a product. Now, some people will say, well, does that come from an animal source? Natural occurring actually comes from lanolin, which comes from sheep wool.
Yep.
So it's not no harm to the sheep that they just extract it out of the wool, and that's where the vitamin D3 comes. Any product that I've been involved in formulating with D, I only use D3.
Yeah.
I don't use D2. So that's something to look at when you say vitamin D. Look at it as D2 versus D3. Same thing with vitamin K. I mean, vitamin K1 is common, but vitamin K2 is probably the active form that you really want. So there are certain things, if you learn a little bit about nutrition, it's not just what's on the label, it's how the product's formulated, the source of the ingredients, how it's mixed or blended, how it's processed. There are different issues when you have liquids in capsules and tablets, of course, and that all depends on how you formulate it.
No, I agree. Just for the listeners out there, I am a believer in nutritional intervention. I think it's a must. Most people know that my therapeutic bend is chronic diseases, and a number of people have heard me lecture on the fact that our treatment options for chronic diseases are limited. Nutrition, lifestyle modification, and supplementation, I think, are very critical components to factor in, whether it's in the area of mental health, cardiovascular disease, pain management, mobility, and so forth. So this nutritional area, I have a passion for, and my passion works two ways, right? I've seen it work. I've been involved, you've been involved in clinical trials on certain supplements, D3, B12, and so forth. And they're interesting examples because they're used from hospital to general practice to pharmacy to consumer, and there's many different forms. But I think if we're going to offer some helpful advice to a listener, especially to a listener who's sitting there going, well, how the hell do I know? I think the best advice is you've got to do your homework, right? As I look at supplements, I was with Dave yesterday, and without mentioning any names, we went into a large pharmacy chain local to where we are, and everything was 50% off. Now, this is no surprise. I mean, back home, we have a large pharmacy chain that seems to have 50% off every day of the week. But when you're making one of these formulations, there is a requirement, whether it's legal or it's ethical, to do a level of testing to ensure that the product conforms to basic standards. In our world, we call it GMP, good manufacturing practice. And that phrase gets thrown around a lot. It's a bit more of a marketing spin than anything else. But when we look at GMP, there is rigors to, even at a nutraceutical level, manufacturing the product, testing the product, if it's a tablet, disintegration times of the product, even down to stability. So when you say, hey, this product's good for 2 years, you actually have some level of evidence that backs it up. So I don't know about you, but I get concerned when I walk into a pharmacy and I see a relatively cheap supplementation, let's say calcium, because let's face it, you can buy calcium for 3 months supply for under $10, right? In some cases. And you can see that that's on 2 + 1 plus 50%. Right. I sit there in my head and I'm working out the math. And even if you have a high-speed line that's punching out 1 million pills a day, I just don't see how the math works out. Your experience in manufacturing, no tattletales or anything like that. I'd like to know what you think when you see these supplements that are either market hyped to such an extent, and they usually come with a compelling deal offer that, oh my God, I need this now and it's only going to cost me a couple of bucks.
Yeah, well, you have to look at that pretty carefully. From the manufacturing side, of course, any time which we've been involved with manufacturing for 40 years, we will approach it like the drug people do, in that we assay everything. We look at that stability after 2 years, and we want to make sure we have the right ingredients. If it's a tablet, we'll test disintegration and friability. If it's a capsule, we'll watch how fast it digests in gastric juice. Same thing with powders or liquids. But the important thing is that when the expiry date on that label gives you a date, that means you should have at that date 100% of the material. In manufacturing, I've seen it, and it just bugs the heck out of me, that somebody will formulate a product and put 100% at date of manufacture. Well, nothing lasts without a shelf life. So we always, when we formulate, would know each of the nutrients in each form, what their lifespan would be. So if we were making a tablet, a powder, a liquid, we would say, well, how much, for example, in a liquid concentrate, at vitamin C do we lose in a year?
Yep.
We would determine, which we've done with studies, it's 30%. So we will put that 30% overage to make sure, if we say it's worth a year,
meets the label claim.
At 100% of the label claim at the end of its shelf life, or the listed shelf life. A lot of times nutrients last a lot longer, depending
But on
on
the same
formula.
token, I can think of a number of nutrients that the moment you expose them to air, they start to
That's right.
rapidly oxidize.
Right.
Which means in many cases, the shelf life that's clicked onto the bottle is kind of a faux pas, because that shelf life exists if that bottle remains sealed.
That's why whenever you formulate a product that has multiple ingredients, you can't just say, well, we made something like this once before with this and this, but not that. No, you have to evaluate the product as formulated with all the ingredients, and you make sure which ones are in. Sometimes we might have to add an antioxidant, like say a tocopherol, or additional amount to prevent something from oxidizing. That's not uncommon at all. And what you want is to make sure you have a good manufacturer that's going to take all those things, like say, proper manufacturing, to make sure they're following all the good manufacturing practices, because that's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. You have to make sure what's on that label is 100% at the expiration date that's been set. And as Sean mentioned, that a lot of times interaction with certain nutrients. For example, when we made some liquid multivitamins for children, we'd have folic acid and we have B2. We found that they interact with each other.
That they do, yeah.
And one of them would deplete the others. So we had to take that into account. So if we're formulating it and we have X milligrams of something, well, that in presence of this will lose 10, 15%, say, over a certain period of time. So we would always have to do all that work on each specific product. And we would do that and do all the proper assays and stability before we put out a product. So if we put out a product, we know what it will last like. Mm-hmm. And we do all that type of work up front. It's a lot more tedious. Mm. It's expensive. And you have to have the right equipment to do it.
And the right people.
And the right people that are willing to do that. And a lot of manufacturers don't do that. I would say, as we talked a little earlier, a few times in the past when somebody says, hey, somebody made a product for so-and-so, you make it for us, how come it's, they're selling it for this, we can't sell it for that from your price? I say, okay, so I'll go out and pull a bunch of these off the shelf. And then we'll take them in the lab and we assay them. And then
the assays that tell
would you
all
like
while.
to,
yeah.
Do I have to explain why that one is probably cheaper? We never formulate without the proper overage to meet all the claims, and that's or interactions. And it also depends how you take certain things. Like, you don't want to take a zinc. So I'm going to take a zinc supplement and then eat high fibers with it, because phytic acid will bind the zinc, and you're not going to absorb it. So there are things in nutrition that you have to pay attention to, how you take it. And a lot of times on the label, they'll tell you, the best advice, when to take it, how to take it. But there are things in that people don't truly understand and just think, it's what's in the bottle, I just chug it and it's perfect. And that's not always
that's not always the case. I think what listeners need to take away from this is nutritional supplementation is really, really good. But it's only as good as the people behind it that have created it. And we can say that the same about any industry, really. So other than blindingly going to a chemist and go, oh my God, it's on 50% off, so I'll grab two of these. This is great. If you're really concerned about your health journey, and if you're going to be a willing participant in your health journey, especially if you're having this to prevent something like cardiovascular disease, you need to do some homework and you need to sort of educate up. And various questions you can ask is, where does the company manufacture? A lot of companies will tell you that. A lot of companies won't. A lot of companies have their own manufacturing facility. I even know companies that will share basic stuff like stability data and certificates of analysis on the batch you're buying. And the reason they do this is to instill confidence that their offering, your choice in their offering, is a smart move. And that's where I'd start to gravitate towards. Also, if you're going to go into the nutritional supplement arena and if you're going to start choosing products for you to take, I would really, really stress you bring on board a healthcare provider who can be part of that journey with you, because it is detailed. As Dave started to touch on, these nutritional ingredients do interact not just with themselves, but in many cases with pharmaceutical agents, and as you just heard, also with foods that you regularly intake. You also need to be aware that whilst you might be taking, let's say, a D3, or you're taking a folic acid, it might not be beneficial for other members of your house to take. And I say that because I've personally been involved in instances very recent where, economics are tight. People are doing it tough, and we all understand that, where they're now looking for supplementation that they can use from, little Johnny to Auntie Mavis. And that can get a bit tricky. You have to remember you're taking these supplements to invoke a health benefit. Right? Now, if it doesn't invoke that health benefit, you don't know what that health benefit is, you don't know what to look for, you probably shouldn't be taking that supplement. On the same token, if you start to feel worse on them, so nausea, brain fog, hives, these are in many cases common reactions to supplements that may have a hygiene problem, i.e. they've just been poorly made or poorly put together. So please consult your physician, consult your naturopath, consult your pharmacist, and don't be afraid to ask really important questions that you feel you now have confidence in choosing that brand, choosing that product and taking it. And please, we've got to stop buying this stuff on price, because I think what you're starting to hear from a very learned man in manufacturing, sometimes the super cheap stuff, irrespective of the marketing hype of economies of scale and all that stuff, doesn't necessarily stack up. So, Dave, any final words for everyone?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. There's obviously, details about the forms of nutrients, how you test them, how you evaluate them. And I think it's a little bit of a job for the consumer to make sure you trust who you're getting things from, because the label doesn't always tell you everything. You just have to use a little bit of your own investigation.
Well said, well said. Okay, everyone, until next time, thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Unfiltered Health. I hope today's episode gave you something to think about, because understanding our health means understanding our world. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share Unfiltered Health with your friends, family, and anyone who cares about getting to the truth behind chronic illnesses and their impact on society. Together, we can break the silence and create a healthier future. See you next time.